Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor, and also thank you to the organizers to attend this very interesting conference, and also for inviting me to Bangladesh all the way from the Netherlands. I'm not going to speak about Bangladesh because I'm not a specialist on this case, and also not on the area. I'm a historian, but basically mostly of African history and transitional justice. And what I will do today is talk more about genocide in a comparative perspective, and also put it perhaps more in a global perspective. So in order to provide a framework, I think, for larger comparisons, to also include Bangladesh. Now, the institute I work for, and I think it's relevant to talk a little bit about it, has a very long name. So it's the Netherlands Institute for War, Holocaust and Genocide Studies. And the institute was established in 1944, and this was done during the Holocaust. And the Holocaust was also perpetrated in the Netherlands. And the institute basically was designed in 1944 by the government in exile, which was at the time sitting in the United Kingdom. And the institute, what they would do is to call on the general population to write diaries, but also to keep memoirs and observations about the war, and also to provide evidence. So in 1945, after the Germans left the Netherlands, the institute first of all turned into a tribunal, and there were 150,000 cases of war crimes in the Netherlands being conducted in 1945, actually using the type of documentation that was already collected since 1944. Now the institute then basically progressed, and it's still in existence. So on one of the pictures on the far right, you can see that not only the archive from the occupation itself in the Holocaust, but also the archive from the trials now sits in the institute, and people still bring materials to the institute. So, from an archival institution, the institute now is a research institution, and it not only studies any longer just the Holocaust perpetrated in the Netherlands, but also wars, conflict, and genocides perpetrated elsewhere. So you can see on the lower left, one of our former directors, he has written quite extensive volumes on the Holocaust in Europe. So nowadays the Institute deals with different cases all over the globe. And specifically in the 1990s, the Institute was tasked with a big investigation over what had happened in Bosnia and Herzegovina in the 1990s, where the Dutch were actually part of a peacekeeping mission. And during that peacekeeping mission, a genocide was perpetrated against 8,000 people. Currently, and I think this is also very much interesting to the region, is that the Institute has installed a very large investigation into colonial violence and possibly genocide that the Dutch colonial state had perpetrated in the 1940s in Indonesia, and at the time it was still called the Dutch East Indies. And I will be happy to talk about this case much more elaborately during perhaps the discussion. Now, basically what we do is we try to study genocide comparatively. And I think one of the biggest questions is how can we explain and understand genocide, its occurrence in culturally, technologically, politically, and temporally different societies. And I think it's relevant to ask ourselves some questions on several disciplines. So the first one is conceptual. What is genocide? What do we understand what genocide is? Is it a legal concept, such as Raphael Lemkin has coined in 1948? Or can we also understand it to be a political crime or a historical phenomenon? And I think both elements are very valuable when we look at genocide. Another question is the epistemological question. Is what do we know about genocide and how do we know it? And I think in the Western world, so I come from the Netherlands, we hardly know anything about what had happened here in Bangladesh in 1971. And this is an epistemological question, of course, also very much related to the cultural setting of where we are based as researchers in the Netherlands. Another important question is the empirical question. So what type of evidence is there for the crime of genocide? Not every genocide has a direct order to actually institute a final solution, as was done, for instance, during the Holocaust in Europe. The legal question, of course, is whose responsibility, who's responsible. And this can be asked on both the individual level, but also on the collective level. I think the state has a role there too. So for criminologists and sociologists, the question goes perhaps a little bit deeper, and it's trying to understand what genocide does to societies, but also ask questions about why do people actually make the decision to commit horrific acts and be involved in genocides. But also, how does the process of genocide evolve? And I will talk about the process just in a moment. I think also the political science questions are very interesting and also very important. And these talk about prevention in the future or reoccurrence. And political scientists usually ask the question how to prevent genocide in the future, but also if it's already ongoing, how to stop it. So what can we learn from the historical perspective? And I have given you just some examples of the most classical cases, stemming from 1904 already, when the Herero and Nama people were massacred by the German state in 1904. And what we know actually is the first genocides to be perpetrated in the 20th century. And there are other examples on different continents. So think about the Armenian massacres in 1915, or the Holocaust that I already referred to, or the Cambodian case, on which Duan will speak in a moment, so I want to talk about that. Or, for instance, cases in Latin America, like Guatemala. There was a genocide in 1982 against indigenous people. So you also see that different groups can be victims of genocide. More recently, of course, there was the case of Rwanda, which was a very speedy genocide. So 1 million people were killed over the short time span of just 100 days. Then there's the case of Srebrenica, of course, in the former Yugoslavia. And also I think we have cases of genocide which are much more recent. So think about what ISIS has done, for instance, against the Yazidi people in Iraq and also in Syria. So what kind of lessons can we learn by looking at some of these cases? And I know this is a very busy and full slide, but I think Gregory Stanton really has helped us understand that genocide is actually a process, and usually it goes through several stages. So it deals with classification. It's a discussion about us versus them. And also symbolization. So in my country, during the Holocaust, Jews were forced to wear a yellow star on their chest. So actually, that we know that they represented that group and were symbolized as such. Also, there's legal discrimination. So people are basically stripped of their legal rights, institutionally, but also educationally, for instance. Dehumanization also plays a key role in genocide. It's basically where the perpetrator group strips people from their human identity, right? And I think this happens in many cases. Organization. There is no genocide without any organization. This is a massive crime, so it involves resources, but also actually people to perpetrate the crime. Then moving towards the violence, you see polarization. So usually this is done by means of propaganda and the media, and I've seen this quite a lot working in Rwanda, where you actually saw the Tutsi group being depicted as snakes and cockroaches, for instance. Then there's the stage of persecution, where you see that initial massacres are already being conducted, or trial killings are being done, before the full-blown stage of genocide occurs, which is the extermination of the group. Obviously, and this is the last case, and also if you think about genocide as a crime, is that there is usually a stage of denial where perpetrators would say that they haven't done what had occurred. So what do we know about genocide from the comparative perspective, aside from it being a process? And I think there are quite some conditions that we can actually distill from looking at these various cases. And Scott Strauss, the political scientist, has done a really good job, and I have a picture of his book. So usually he says, before genocide, there's a situation of armed conflict, or there's a crisis which can be economical or demographical. or there's political instability. So usually very quick political transitions animate a situation of mass violence. Also, there's usually, or always actually, an ideology involved in genocide, because it's a mental crime as well. It's a crime specifically targeted against a specific group, which is then thought about in very specific ways. Also, you see often that there's past discrimination of the group, and also a situation of impunity, where prior violence has never been prosecuted. So basically, genocide is most likely when elite perpetrators perceive some kind of high threat by the group that they are targeting, and see themselves as vulnerable. And also they define the threatening identity group as unwinnable and uncontainable. And obviously, I talked about organization just a little bit, is that the perpetrating state always needs to have the organizational capacity to inflict violence over space and over time. And we've heard this morning as well that the case of Bangladesh took a much longer period, so you need some organization to do that. Also, there needs...
Please conclude within 1 minute.
Okay, thank you. And also, perpetrating state needs to face weak restraints. So there's also some things we do not know about genocide, and I think this is what we talk a lot about with our students, but also with colleagues, is that looking at the process and looking at the stages, a lot of societies actually have all ingredients to actually go to a situation of genocide, but it not always occurs. And perhaps that's also a positive thing, is that genocide is actually very rare. It's a rare crime, so statistically, only there's a chance of 30-1 with all the ingredients being present. Also, I think, and this is a very interesting and important one, is how to look at political variances between cases. So how to assess, for instance, a genocide that's perpetrated by a colonial state against the colonized people. Or how to look at a state which is centralized or decentralized, and the dynamics of violence and the choice for genocide are different there. And I think this is also the case for when we talk about insurgency or insurgents actually commit violence. So for main conclusions, genocide is always a process, a dynamic process of decision and non-decision making, and several events that animate it. And the logic of genocide is to crush opponents in the short term and destroying their ability to pose a long-term challenge. And genocide is there for the long term. But the conditions, as I said, that produce genocide are more frequent than the outcome. And as much as we know about genocide, I also think that there are areas where we do not know so much about it, and there's still ways of doing scholarly research and also finding out the truth and knowing about specific cases, which perhaps were not so much known before. I thank you very much.
Thank you.